Welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am one of your hosts, Eileen, here with my co-host.
Ellie.
And today, the topic du jour is alchemy. And we're really excited to dive into this and talk about alchemy in the context of your daily life for the most part, because that's what we do here. We weave the magic into the mundane, and isn't that what alchemy is? That transmutation of the mundane into magical experiences and things. But first, as per usual, we are going to talk about our magical moments. Ooh, and before we get to that, if you're listening to this on Monday in the morning when it comes out, there is still time to hop into our Patreon community for today's Witch's Corner, Ask Us Anything, Q&A. Come into the coven. Come get to know us better. Come let us get to know you. It's 11.11 a month. We have a Q&A every month. We've got book club every month. That's happening next week. We're reading Women Who Run with the Wolves this month. And we've always got a new moon card reading, and we're dropping in more and more bits and pieces. Card reading has turned into ceremony. So if you need a little more ceremony in your life, it's the place to be is inside the Patreon. So as always, there'll be a link down below. And Ellie, what is your magical moment for this week?
I want to speak to this moment in time this weekend where I looked at my family, which are, we have a handful of dogs, a handful of cats, my lover and I all living under one roof. And I don't know if you've ever experienced the deep love that comes from just like acknowledging who you have in your life and how grateful you are. And we were laying in bed, the dogs are all on the bed. It was like it was Sunday morning, just this morning ritual where everyone's together and they're all play fighting because, of course, as soon as they come up onto the bed, it's a wrestling ring. And somebody's got to go get a chew toy and somebody's got to go get a stuffed toy that they can go chase. Like there's just everyone's character really came forward. And I sat back and I thought to myself, I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky. This is
Mm,
more than I could have ever dreamt of in a family. And as we continue to grow our family, it is just the most magical thing ever to look back and go, look at us. Look at how far we've come. Look at us.
I love
Yes,
that.
that was my magical moment. It was just a great morning, a great Sunday morning.
That's lovely. I have definitely had that experience before. It happens every now and then for sure. It's funny what popped into my mind, and so I'm going to talk about it. As you were speaking to that, this is an old magical moment. This is several years ago now. But as you were speaking, it just vividly brought back this memory that I have. And it's the place that I go whenever I do any kind of like mindset exercise where it's like, remember a time when you were just so happy, like really present and full of joy. And it is me lying on my living room floor, having had probably a little too much to drink. Maybe there was some fungi involved. And I was in my new house after I had left my partner. I'd found this little house. It was me to a T. It had slanted roofs in the upstairs. I still live there. Now I own it. Slanted roofs in the upstairs. Not one, but two clawfoot bathtubs. When I lived with my ex-husband, we had no tubs at all. And so two clawfoot tubs, a gas stove, a farmhouse sink. And I had my housewarming party, and all my friends were there. One of my friends was playing records on my little turntable, and I was just laying on the floor, like, holy shit, life does not get better than this.
We've made it.
We've made it, folks. We've made it. And so anytime I'm feeling down or blue, I bring myself back to that moment, and it works like a charm every time.
I love this. What a great memory. Thanks for sharing that with us.
My pleasure. It's the alchemy of remembering, of calling to mind, and of creating future memories. It's a perfect example for both of us here, both our magical moments of how we create magic in the mundane moments.
Yes. Shall we dive into our topic?
Let's dive in. Let's start. Will you tell us a little bit about what alchemy is?
Yeah, I think that very much like other definitions that we've talked about for some things, like what is ceremony? It's kind of hard to put your finger on it. What is magic? It's kind of hard to put your finger on it. Alchemy is similar to that, but essentially it's transforming and transmuting experiences in life. In history, alchemists were seen as similar to magicians, and it was taking this prima matter, or this primal matter, or first matter, and changing it into something else. And often in history we think of alchemists of turning coal into gold, or into diamonds for that matter. Nothing into something is essentially what we're doing. And we see this in our everyday through things like cooking, taking all of these ingredients and making something completely different. And
Hmm.
in creating, taking our art supplies, or a lump of clay and turning it into a bowl, or a vessel of sorts. The alchemy is really how we transmute and transform our experiences from A to B.
That's a beautiful definition. And I love it. Something sprung into my mind as you were speaking. I used to go to an Indian restaurant and you'd order your food, and inevitably they would come out with like a pretty crappy iceberg lettuce salad before the rest of your meal. You didn't order it. They would come out and the server would always say, something is better than nothing. And with that phrase, he transmutes this shitty salad into a great salad because it was free and something is better than nothing. So that just, it was the alchemizing server of Bubba Dubba. That's what it was called, Bubba Dubba.
Baba Dubba,
Yeah,
less.
yeah. But it really is. It can be that simple, right? And it can be a lot more complex also.
Very, very much so. We see this especially in priestess work. We see this in us as witches, and we see this in general as healers, that this is all alchemizing and transmuting experiences or ailments or celebrations, even from just a date to something that is much more complex.
Yeah, anybody who helps to imbue our experiences with meaning is performing alchemy. So anybody can do it. It's certainly the path of witches and priestesses and healers in very specific ways compared to the general populace, but anybody can alchemize an experience or a meaning into something.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, the most easily accessible understanding of how this plays out in daily life, how we practice, is in the context of our daily routines and alchemizing them into rituals, into ceremony, which we've spoken to many a time, but we're going to keep coming back to it because it's important to reinforce the things that we know. So, yeah, turning that experience of brushing your teeth from just, I have to clean my teeth, to I am cleansing my sacred vessel, right? The place where the speech comes from in my body is being cleaned by my teeth being cleaned. My breath isn't foul because I've alchemized what's going on in there, quite literally.
I love the
I
term
wonder,
foul, by the way.
yeah,
What a good
foul.
use of words.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like you said about how every day anybody can really, become an alchemist. And I think that we are alchemists in our own life. The difference between going about our everyday to changing something into a sacred ritual is literally just intention, as you mentioned. And the intention can be put to anything. So, as we like, the alchemy really is about speaking in circles and speaking in riddle. And here we are, and it could be anything, and anything can be. But we talk about simple rituals for transformation and manifestation are things like journaling. It's
Mhm.
things like mindset, intentions, meditation. Meditation, especially, I found, as a meditation teacher of the past, the thing that people came to me the most often with was anxiety, or feeling
Yeah.
anxious about a certain situation. and watching the student go from shoulders to their ears, really hyped up about and amped up about the situation, if you will, let's call this a 10, and bringing them down to a 2 just through simple practice of breathing and attention to breath, and maybe it changing their breath pattern, changing the way that their body sits in its natural state of, like, instead of shoulders up around your ears, shoulders relaxed, knees relaxed, hips relaxed. It is something that we can take this, really amped up state and bring it into a more relaxed and calm state just through simple practices.
Mhm.
And, I love the flash. I love the massive altar. I love the flowers everywhere. I love all of those things. And they contribute to the transmutation, the beauty, the alchemy of the situation. And one of the things that we can really see for ourselves is that we often have the tools that we need already in our toolbox. It's just a matter of being taught how to use them.
Mhm. As you were speaking there, it struck me that to alchemize something requires, and correct me if you see it differently, but requires either the addition or the subtraction of energy. It's like, cooking, you have to add heat. If you want to change the state of something, if we think about the really magical idea of turning coal into gold, for instance, they were never just like waving a wand at it. There was an addition of energy. There was playing around with elements. There was taking things away, putting things in. And so, this idea of being able to alchemize our emotional states, right? Taking that energy that anxiety has, because certainly it has a ton of energy in there, and shifting it into presence, into stillness, into potentially productivity if you're wanting to go that route. Movement is another really powerful way to do this. Shaking is a great way to transmute fear into calm or just process emotions. But also, if you're feeling low, we know that putting on your favorite song and getting up and dancing, it does an enormous amount to shift your state, to change your physical and emotional and spiritual being and the way that it is. So there's all of these really lovely little tools, which we speak to in so many episodes because they're so powerful on so many levels.
Yes, yes. I want to read from a book that actually we're reading in our in the 13 Moon Mystery School right now, which is called On Becoming an Alchemist, a guide for the modern magician. And the book is written by Catherine McCon. But in here, speaking of energy, in here she says, so if you wish to change something, the first thing you must do is discover the true nature of your relationship to it. Then you will be able to see how to change it by changing yourself. This is the basic
Mm,
logic of alchemy.
hmm.
So it's
Yeah, I
our
love that.
relationship to the thing. This is why, cooking something, we can make a chopped salad, or we can make the most wonderful meal that we've ever tasted. And it happens to be, let's say, example, your palate loves a chopped salad.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
not what I'm into at this exact moment. You know, not what I'm craving. But, it's literally, it is this emotional, this energetic shift happens when we begin to realize, oh, for the example of meditation, oh, I feel my heart racing. I feel the tension in my body. I feel the shallowness of my breath. And then
Mhm,
changing the relationship to it is really just, okay, let's see if we can open up the breath a little bit more. Notice
mhm,
what that does to your body. Notice what that does to your mind. It's like we go in and we go out, and we go in and we go out, and we start to see that relationship through the lens of shifting our states. So, yes, yes, to
mhm.
shifting ourselves becomes is able to we become available to shift other things around us.
And as you're speaking too, it strikes me, we're talking about shifting out of negative spaces, shifting into having more magic in your world and perceiving things differently. But this also applies to shifting like towards something that you desire. I was listening to a masterclass today about upper limits in business because, as everybody who's listening to this is aware, I'm sure Ellie and I are entrepreneurs. We hope you're aware at this point. But the idea of, whenever you come up against your upper limit, it's because there's something in your mind that's afraid of what's on the other side of it at some level. And so it's, again, what is your relationship to that? Are you afraid of being ridiculed? Are you afraid of being seen as greedy? Are you afraid of some of your friends being like, I don't have time for you anymore? Like, what is it that we're afraid of? What is our relationship to that next level? And how is it holding us back? And then the action is to shift it. This particular course that I was listening to, she was like, go into the emotion you would feel if that bad thing happened and feel it. Because by feeling it, you kind of disarm it, right? It's like, oh, well, I felt it and I didn't die. So so you've transmuted that fear into like, okay, I have the tools to deal with even the worst case scenario. And that's a form of alchemy as well. And it helps to go after our dreams and to do the big, potentially scary, but very much worth it and rewarding things in life.
I love this.
Hmm.
Shall we talk about alchemy and ceremony?
Yeah, yeah, let's.
Talk to me a little bit about your course, Light Witchcraft for the Woo Curious, and how you use alchemy in the course itself.
Sure. We don't do any ceremony in the actual course, but everybody who's in the course gets access to whichever Wheel of the Year ceremony happens to fall in and around the course. So there is that piece of ceremony. And when it comes to the Wheel of the Year, it's almost alchemizing time, right? It's creating that meaningful pause, that taking on of the energies and the nuances of the season and flowing with rather than against, which we so often do. And in the context of the course, the larger course, one of the things that many of the past participants have said to me was just this re-magicking,
Mm.
re-magicking of their morning routine. That was a big piece. We talk about sacred starts and creating prayer and ritual. And for a lot of people, that is that morning routine or ritual piece, and that re-imbuing it with magic, and also the permission to be curious and follow the thread. When I
Mm.
created the course, I kind of expected full-on newbies to be coming in, people who were like, I don't know if I believe in any of this stuff. And I had a couple people like that, but also I had women who, they've got maybe more crystals than I do in, in a lot of cases. But one past participant had said, she had kept her woo really tucked in tight since she was in her early 20s. And this course gave her that sense of like, oh, I'm not alone. It's safe to explore, and there's some knowledge to be gained here. There's little bits and pieces to pick up along the way. So I think that is where the alchemy in this course comes from, is the permission. I talk about permission a lot. We don't need permission. Like, I don't believe we should have to need permission for things like rest, for things like exploring our curiosities, for setting boundaries. But the reality is that it feels really damn good if somebody says, you have permission to do this.
Mm. Mhm.
It's like this, oh, right. It's more the reminder than the permission itself, but that is a part of the alchemy of Unleash Your Inner Witch, is this permission and community.
I love as well with what you're teaching in this course is it's not about the ceremony itself. It's about the elements of ceremony so that your tool belt is either filled up or you have, new tools in it that you are able to take that and create whatever ceremonies you want. Because really, a morning routine is just a ceremony. A sacred start is just a ceremony. It just looks different than when we're in group ceremony with people, you know? And
Hmm.
I think that that permission slip is very much needed. I understand and agree that like you don't need my permission, but hang on, I'm going to give it to you because
Yeah.
somewhere along the way someone has taken it away from you and it's probably you that's taken it away from you. And
Yeah.
so it's I think that it's really so important to be able to understand how you can really incorporate the tools that you're teaching into their everyday life because it just becomes like we talked about this as part of transmuting the experience. This is just something that happens in our everyday life that we now bring more attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. I often say that, you know, I don't want my clients to need me for very long. I want them to want to work with me. And obviously, going deeper into one-on-one is its own beautiful, transformative space. But I want to give people the tools to practice on their own and make the practice their own. So yeah, I'm here. Come on back. I got all sorts of goodies in my bag to to share with you. But also, if you just do this one piece, you'll walk away with the tools that you need to really a foundation for your practice and feeling more confident in it and feeling equipped to transmute your own life.
I love that. Come on back.
Mhm.
Come on back.
Mhm.
The next ceremony I want to talk about. So some of the ceremonies that I host actually this spring, there'll be a maiden to mother ceremony that
Ooh.
happens. And I think this is a really key piece for women because the alchemy of moving from a maiden to a mother is a major transition in life. And often what happens is we don't either see it as that transition or we don't know how to see it as that transition or we don't acknowledge that it is a transition even. And
Mhm.
so I find that we see mothers who are feeling like they don't know who they are anymore. They no
Mhm.
longer have tools that they can cope. And so we see a lot of things like I can't get this word out actually without rolling my eyes with things like mommy juice and coping mechanisms like that
Oh.
because we don't understand that we're not here to escape the role of motherhood. We may need breaks, we might be touched out,
Mhm.
we might all of those things can be true. But when we honor the transition from maidenhood to motherhood, we can now look at our maidenhood and, understand that that is a period of time in our life. And
Mhm.
now that we've transitioned into motherhood, and whether you have children or not, there is a marked, like, children just enforce this transition. And at some point in your life, you create the transition yourself where you go, that was my 20s is what we often refer to it
Mhm.
as. That was my 20s. And now that I'm in my 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond, those were days that I can't believe I got away with sleeping 3 seconds, you know? Last night I slept 10 hours and I woke up feeling glorious. Glorious. And I
Yes.
mean,
Oh my gosh.
motherhood is going back to sleeping those 3 seconds when you have infants, but it's also understanding that this is part of the phase of life that you're in. Maybe I'm stepping into my chromedom with this 10-hour a day, this snooze that I had, you
My
know?
mother insists on 10 hours a night
Oh,
and
it
has
is
done since I can remember.
wow. That those are my goals. My intentions for this new moon, one of them was to focus on sleep, was to focus on
Ooh.
rest.
Yeah. Speaking
So,
straight to my heart.
yeah, I am. And so the transition between maiden and mother is a big transition because oftentimes our mothers were not tuned into that transition and we feel regret or resentful towards children because we can no longer do, be, and have the things that we were able to when we were a maiden, when we
Mhm.
were
And
in that phase of life.
there's that lack of societal honoring of the transition too, which compounds it, right? There's, oh, like when are you going to lose the baby weight? And like the comments from media of like, oh, 3 days later and she looks like she never had a baby. And I'm like, well, that's not okay. That's actually, there's something wrong there. And even just that, oh, like how are you not able to come out? Like it's been 6 weeks. The fact that the States makes women go back to work at 6 weeks is appalling to me. Having been a midwife, and that 6 week visit was like most women were just kind of like, is there air up here?
Yeah.
Maybe? Not sure. Maybe not. And so this lack of societal caring and tending to the woman who has had a baby and has made that transition makes it so much harder because it's like society tells you got to go back to being normal, like as if you could ever revert to who you were before you
No.
brought a human being into the earth.
And
Yeah.
you brought up something curious around we also force women before they're ready to have children. And I say this as a societal norm of like, okay, now you're married at 20 or
Mm,
whatever, at whatever age. And okay, next comes baby. And so
hmm.
let's get on this. And I
Yeah,
think
that.
about my parents married, and they actually had children fairly late for a standard of the age they were. You know, they waited almost 4 years to have kids, which is a
Mhm.
wild, you know,
My
my,
parents did as well. My mom always said, wait, like be married, have fun being married before you
yeah,
bring a child into this. But most people don't.
no. And my brother, and I think about this now, you know, my brother and his wife got married, and I think we're pregnant probably on the the eve of the wedding, you know? And so they had their first child before their first wedding anniversary. And I don't think that there are anyone listening to this, there's definitely no regrets there that I can see from my behalf, but either of you reach out if there are. But tell me different. And then we have, you know, the I think that generation was just in a moment, or that the between the two of them, they were in a moment of like, we know we want to do this. We want to do this right away. And
Hmm.
I know that my sister-in-law had said to me, like, all I wanted to do was be married and have children. And she
Hmm.
transitioned into that role right away. And so we have this societal forcing of hurry up and get married, hurry up and have kids, hurry up your biological clock, especially as women, it's ticking. And as somebody who's trying to conceive in her 40s, I have disconnected from the medical system at large because of this belief, because of
Hmm.
everywhere I go, the first thing that is out of their mouth is just a comment about my age. And I'm like, I'm youthful. Okay, yeah,
I
exactly.
had I had women who were like, "Oh, I didn't think I could apply because I was 40 to midwifery care because they're like, I wasn't low risk because I was 40." I was like, "Oh my God, no." It's so
Enough.
enough. Enough. I
I
had
lo-
46-year-old clients. Like,
Enough. A friend of mine just had her baby at 47.
hmm.
You know, this is a healthy baby boy, and her other son is 18. Like, this is the second generation in the same family. You know,
Hmm.
I think that we've just forced women into having children and to move into motherhood before they're ready. And because of that, there is resentment that happens. And so
Hmm.
the ceremony between maiden to mother is really all about honoring who you were, who you currently are, and how to really create the archetype of who you are becoming.
Hmm.
And this
Hmm.
is this is really the magic and the alchemy of this ceremony, because understanding who you were, we don't even, you know, as somebody has their first moon cycle, there's no honoring of youth that happens. There's just like,
Hmm.
great, like get on with the next thing. Like, okay, 28 days
Carry
from now, let's
on.
see if it happens again.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm so privileged to be in spaces where I've had friends and other the healers that I trained with who've had children who were reaching their moon times and were honoring it and had prepared their daughters for this as being a joyful event. And it was really celebrated in a beautiful way. And it made me so sad for the fact that my experience was it was fine. I wasn't scared. Like my mom was very open with and like no nonsense about it. It wasn't like this, "Ooh, you have to be ashamed of it" or anything. But it also was just kind of like this nuisance, right? This nuisance that was going to
Mm,
happen. once every month. My very first period, no, it was my second period. We went to West Edmonton Mall with the band to the water park.
Wow.
I
That's a tough
remember
one.
having, it was so tough having to learn how to put a tampon in for my second period ever. Oh my God, mortified. But anyways, that's not alchemy. That's
I
something
it
else. But
is.
it's the
It's going
lack,
from yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's that lack of any kind of reverence around it. I didn't develop any kind of appreciation for my cycle until I was a midwife. And I didn't really start to be like, ooh, I actually can welcome my period and embrace those days until the past couple of years since I entered into healers training that I have finally been able to celebrate that piece of being a woman.
Mm. Yeah, it's lovely.
Mhm.
It's lovely.
I'm
I think we
excited for your
can,
ceremony.
yeah, I think that we can talk about birthing ceremonies, that this is also another ceremony that happens. Is tell me your experience as a midwife, what maybe you saw or maybe what happened with some of the births that you attended.
I would say again, it's an area where most people don't think about that piece, right? There definitely were the clients who usually they were planning home births if they were into the ceremonial side of birth and would have affirmations. Often they would have them ready to go to the hospital in case they had to go as well, but just creating that sacred space. It was the clients who, of course, the medical system labeled difficult because it was these clients that if we did have to go into the hospital for whatever reason, they were the ones who, insisted on the lights down low, as if you need to see anything in a birthing room until the baby is born. Just saying, unless you're doing an emergency procedure. But they would insist, and they had their boundaries. They would ask that if an OB was consulted for any reason, they would ask why and what's my alternative and what are the risks, and it was always like the difficult quote unquote clients. I freaking love them. But ceremony around birth is really holding that sacred space and not interfering with it unless there was a real deep need. And I think different care providers are better at that than others. And obviously, midwives overall, I think, are, but not every midwife is the same there either, because we're all different and we all have different comfort levels and expertise. But some of the most beautiful births I have witnessed felt ceremonial in that the woman was present in her body. That is one of the things that
Mm,
marks a ceremonial birth, is that the woman stays present. She's
mm,
very in her body, so she might not be present to the people in the room, but she's present in
mm,
her body. And
mm,
it's peaceful when babe comes earthside.
mm.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah,
could tell stories about beautiful births, specific stories all day, but
yeah.
we don't have that kind of time.
There's one woman in particular that I follow on Instagram, and one of her mantras is birth is not an emergency.
Oh, yeah.
This is not an
No,
emergency.
no. And pregnancy is not an illness.
Oh God. And for our next episode, stay
Anybody
tuned,
who
folks.
wants, yeah, anybody who wants a whole episode on birth, let us know in the comments. You can respond. There's a poll on Spotify or just find us over on Instagram. We don't post a lot on there, but we are checking that account, we promise, at the Woo Curious podcast. And yeah, let us know. We will talk about birth till the cows
All
come
day
home,
long.
all day
All
long.
day. I'll talk about
If you
the
want,
trying to conceive part of things.
yeah. We can go science, we can go spiritual, we got it covered.
Yeah,
For
definitely.
For
It's
today,
true.
we're going to move on in the name of time. But do you want to talk a little bit about the alchemy of grief and death ceremonies?
Yeah. So I what I love about grief and death ceremony is that we go from like death is so permanent, first of all, and it's so for some, even if it's like a long drawn out transition, it's still sudden. You go from being in your physical form to no longer in being in your physical form. And so this suddenness of death sometimes creates, I'm going to say, more grief because there is no ceremony. And we see ceremony in, a funeral is a ceremony in some capacity. This is just the ceremony that is happening. But the alchemy in the ceremony is where I think we're desiring more time in this
Mhm.
movement from presence, physical body, into and impermanence to the permanence of them never coming back. And so the alchemy through this is really just understanding in ceremony that we always have access to our loved ones, no matter if they are
Mhm.
in physical form. And I'll say, the other day I was speaking to my mother, and we're looking for a certain item that was father's my father's grandfather's piece of paraphernalia from the war. And she said to me, "Oh, honey, the next time you're talking to dad," and I was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." It took me a moment of what she was really asking. She said, "Can you ask him where this is?" And I was like, "Oh, of course I can. Of course I can." And so I think the alchemy is really rooted in, for ceremony through death and grief, is rooted in understanding that we have direct access to our loved ones at any point in time, and that we get to honor them as many times as possible. And I really started to see this through one of the gals that I dated, you know many moons ago. Her mother had passed away the year before we started dating, and every Sunday her and her brother went to the mausoleum, and they brought her flowers, and they brought like food or goods for her of some capacity, and they spoke to her. And when we came up to her plot, she would say, "Oh, hey, mom, the first time I came, this is Ellie. I just really wanted you to introduce you to her." And at that moment in time, I was like, what are we doing here? What are we
This is
doing?
weird.
This is
Yeah.
so, and yet it was so absolutely normal. Like, "Oh, hey, this is Ellie. I want to tell you about her, and she wanted to come see you." And I thought to myself, like, wow, this is really, really cool to be able to
Mhm.
honor our loved ones that have passed over in different ways. So we change our relationship. This is the alchemy, the alchemical part of this. We change our relationship from them being here in the present moment and in a physical form to something that is no longer in the physical form. So,
Mhm.
alchemy and ceremony is just a
Mhm.
really beautiful way to honor these transitions in our life.
Yeah, I love that. It is beautiful. I feel like I speak to my grandmother more now than I ever did when she was alive. That's that's the magic of it. And there's pain, but there's also such comfort in knowing that that access is always there. It never goes away.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. So we've touched a lot on some of the deeper moments of alchemy that we can craft or create that happen in our lives, and also some of the easier ways to access it or to just weave it into our daily lives in the everyday. It doesn't have to be big and complicated always. This always comes back to letting it be easy, letting it be simple, letting yourself be right. A fun way that you can play around with alchemy, so when we think about manifestation, when we think about intention setting and all of that kind of stuff, that is a form of alchemy, right? It's imbuing those actions with intentions is what gives them weight and meaning. And a fun way to play around with this is to work with symbols or sigils. And I know that both of us were chatting before we came on about, well, like we're not really well versed in sigils, but we've definitely both created some sigils in our lives. I'm thinking about, secret messages written in code symbols in high school between girlfriends. That's a form of alchemy. Or if you like runes and perhaps some of the rune forms, I'm actually really hopeful that we'll be able to get a guest on the podcast she knows all about runes. I gotta ask her. But that carved into the side of a candle for your ceremony, that's a form of alchemy. Or even choosing symbols. I don't know how many of you choose a sign from the universe, but that's a pretty common practice in the manifestation world of choosing a symbol that you would like the universe to send you to receive if you're on the right track or if this is the right decision or what have you. I had a friend who told a story about asking for a volcano as her sign. And then
Wow.
I can't remember what erupted, but something in her kitchen or so, like something. There was a volcanic explosion of sorts in her house. She's like, this was pretty extreme, and it still came. But that's a form of alchemy as well.
I particularly love asking for symbols. And I also like this volcano symbol. I favor okay, as the meme goes, like, I'm just waiting for a signier sign. I'm like, okay, the signier sign is that you're gonna send me an elephant. Like,
Right.
where am I gonna see an elephant in here? And I think I've told this story before about, practicing my Duolingo
Oh,
at like
yeah.
11:30 at night, and one of the characters in the, you've passed this level, and there's an elephant.
Hi. Or the time you were on your way to like a yoga retreat and the woman across you with the
Oh, the
tattoo of
wolf,
the wolf on her chest. You're like
you
looking out the
know,
window, like, where are the wolves? Where are the wolves? And then it was like, here you go. Not where you thought
and
it was gonna be.
no, not what I thought. My
Yeah.
wolfie.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a fun way to play with it. And you can, I know a lot of people who kind of have one consistent sign. It's always a sign that they're kind of on the right path or doing the right thing. But then other people practice, or you could still have both, where you choose a specific sign for a specific goal or dream or purpose. And things like synchronicities, like angel numbers, those are alchemy as well. It doesn't harm anybody, but every time you see 333 or 444 or 1111, my personal favorite, it's just like, oh, yeah, I'm doing something right. Okay, cool. All is well. And whether or not that's a sign from above, we all know that we think it is here. But even before I did, it was just this little reassurance that shifted my mood, that alchemized how I was feeling, gave me comfort, which allowed me to take action, which is
Mm-hmm.
so much of what magic is. It's bringing comfort to allow you to take action.
With you.
So we'd love to hear from you after you listen to this episode. Are there alchemical practices that you use in your life that were you aware of them being alchemy? Are you aware now? Come find us over on Instagram, the.woocurious.podcast, and let us know. Or join our Patreon and come tell us in Q&A. If you're
I would love
watching
that.
the video, I just created a mustache out of my marker.
Shall we
Oh,
talk a little bit about what's coming up for you?
mm-hmm.
What do you have going on this week?
Yeah, as we mentioned, I've got the doors open to unleash your inner witch. I had a wait list and then I decided, screw it, everybody gets all the wait list bonuses. So there's no wait list. It's just come on in.
Come on
Come on
in.
in.
The door is
At the
open.
time of the doors open, at the time of recording, I am still planning and deciding what my two-part freebie masterclass is going to be, but that'll run the last week of February. That's all I know right now, but it'll be 2 days. It'll be free. I'll be talking about it next week. And you can find me at myluminous_life_ on Instagram to keep track of what it is. It should drop this week. And then yeah, I'd love to have you inside, unleash your inner witch, give you some of that alchemy of permission, of exploration, that sweet held container to explore all of the woo and imbue your life with a little more magic.
Oh,
What about you,
lovely.
Ellie?
We have the doors open for just a few more days with Wild Woman. I have spoke about this program for the last few months, and it is just going to be a 10 out of 10 experience for anybody who wants to add more magic into their life, if you will, through ceremony and integration. And so
Mhm.
we're going to go deep, we're going to go fast, and we're going to go far. And I can't wait for all of you to come with me.
Well, and integration is such an important piece and it gets missed so often. So I'm so
Mm,
glad you're providing that extra piece. And as always, links will be in the show notes below. And we look forward to speaking to you again this time next week.
yeah. Thanks so much, Woo Crew.
Bye.